Chris, it's a great honor and privilege to welcome you to Airline Profits Executive Interviews as the second special guest to our 2023 series of interviews. So how are you today?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Where about are you calling from?
I'm coming here from Panama in Central America, and your speaker last week, Chris Amanechi, he used to live in Panama as well, so I do know him, and I look forward to watching that. I just got the link today, and I will watch it and encourage everyone watching us here now to go back and look at last week and see Chris. I'm sure shared great information on revenue management and how to be more profitable.
Very good. Okay, so as an introduction, can you tell us a little bit about you and how you got attracted to the aviation industry?
Okay, I came to aviation because I spoke Spanish. So I had done a study abroad, in the airline industry needs foreign language speakers. So I was hired by ATPCO, the airline tariff publishing company in Washington, to be a fare filer. So I got my start in the industry 30 years ago, I think over 30 years ago now, filing fares. And from there, I went on to Department of Transportation, was head of pricing and a revenue manager of Amtrak, worked at IATA, and now I have run Airline Information, which is a conference company for airlines for the last almost 20 years now. But what we're going to talk about today is my side job, which is the Loyalty Security Alliance, where we help airlines with fraud, particularly in loyalty, but also credit card and cybersecurity, et cetera. So airlines, hotels, and even retailers. But today, of course, we'll talk about airlines.
Very good. Thank you, Chris, for that. Now, as you just mentioned, we'll talk mostly today about fraud trends in the airline industry. So my first question in that regard is, why are airlines and travel companies such a target for fraudsters?
Yes, well, pretty simple, pretty easy to answer. Fraudsters need to travel too. So that's one reason. So fraudsters need to travel, so they're not going to pay for their travel. So if people are people trafficking, human smuggling, prostitution, they don't want to pay for their air or their hotel related to their travel. So that's one of the reasons. And then second, particularly airlines have a soft spot for fraud because no one wants to arrest fraudsters in the airport, because if you send police to the airport, it's going to look like there's terrorism or something. So the passengers get scared. So sometimes you may even know that there's someone traveling on a fraudulent ticket, but you let it go for the good of the flight, right, or the good of the business, greater good. So fraudsters or someone buying a fraudulent ticket, because often it's disintermediated. Someone will fraudulently steal a ticket or a credit card, take over an account, and then another person will buy it in a dark marketplace. So, but either way, whoever's traveling, they don't like to stop them in the airports.
Okay. Now, can you tell us how do fraudsters attack airlines?
Yes. So a bit of a convoluted question. I mean, there's everything from we have everything from employee fraud to cybersecurity issues where there's a hack or a breach, to fraudsters stealing credit cards and then booking tickets with stolen credit cards. And of course, I work in loyalty fraud. This is the year of account takeovers. So traditionally, fraudsters have somehow stolen credit cards and then maybe sold the credit card number on the dark web. Someone bought that credit card, and then they used it to fly, to buy a ticket fraudulently. But this year is the year of account takeovers. So what the fraudsters are doing is just taking over everyone's account. So a lot of us are guilty of using the same password across multiple accounts. So once they get in probably the same entry, like your email and the same password. So if they get one of your accounts, they can get all of them, right? So they get your airplane account, and the next thing you know, they have your Hilton and your Air Miles, etc. So they take over the accounts, and this is a year of that, and they use that to book travel fraudulently.
Okay. Now, beyond account takeovers, how have fraudsters' tactics against airlines evolved after the pandemic?
Yeah, the pandemic was a real boon for fraudsters, really helped out. So what the pandemic did was cause a lot of people to be sitting at home, right?
Yeah.
So you get what I call the newbie fraudster. So you can go to dark web marketplaces or even just in Google and read how to do some fraud, commit fraud, right? So people with time on their hands during COVID did so. And there are tools like emulators where you don't have to be so sophisticated hacker or have deep knowledge. You can buy the tools that you need in dark marketplaces or even the Telegram messaging app, get the tips on how to use them, even get customer support for how to use them from some of the fraudsters. So we have a growth in newbie fraudsters. And one of the things that was interesting was airlines weren't a huge target during COVID because people weren't flying. So a lot of these newbie fraudsters, they're turning to airlines now, but during COVID, they went after food home delivery. So each country has their Uber Eats or the local version of that. And you would think like, oh, okay, this is $10 or $7, $15, whatever it is. So it's a relatively small amount, but the newbie fraudsters, they're not going to pay for lunch. So a lot of them gained their skills stealing from the home delivery and now home food delivery. And now that travel's ramped up and there's a big volume, they can hide their fraudulent activity in the larger volume of airline transactions or hotel transactions, so that now they're turning their interest to travel.
I see. Now, how do airlines fight fraud? Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Yes. So I would say the biggest challenge to airlines, of course, fight fraud in some better than others, but most do a fairly good job of it. The challenge is silos. So because when we talk about fraud, there's different areas to fraud. You have, as I said, there's employee fraud, which might be a different, under a different area, internal audit or something. Then you have credit card fraud, which airlines do quite well. There's a couple of systems that they mostly use. They've been using these same systems since 2008, and they do quite well against core credit card fraud, which is what's driving that account takeover, right? If the airlines are going to stop the credit card fraud, they're going to find a simpler, a lower hanging fruit. So airlines have a system or systems in place, and in terms of core credit card fraud, basically as there's a scoring tool. As bookings come in, the likelihood of fraud is scored. If it's, it could be green lighted, it could be killed, or it could be sent to a queue for manual review, where someone looks at that and decides whether to accept the booking. I might dig into a little bit, like where is this person from? Where's their IP address from? Does the telephone match? So etc. So as bookings come in, they're red lighted, green lighted, or yellow lighted, where they're reviewed, sent for manual review. Some of the newer systems eliminate the manual review. But when we say fraud, it's pretty complicated, because you have this credit card fraud, you have loyalty fraud, you have chargebacks, which are sort of part of fraud. And chargeback was something that came up really big in COVID with the airlines, where the airlines weren't giving refunds. I mean, particularly you're in Montreal. Well, the Canadian Airlines didn't give refunds. So
Yeah.
what did that do? That caused people to do chargebacks, call their credit card company and say, hey, wait a minute, they canceled my flight. I want my money back. And what has that done? That educated consumers. So now airlines are facing a higher amount of chargebacks, because they essentially educated their consumers that you can do chargebacks. So now, I mean, you have things like, let's take the Canadian market. Maybe your flight's delayed from some type of smoke from the fires, right? Oh, my flight's delayed, so I'm going to do a chargeback. So airlines are definitely dealing with a higher amount of chargebacks. That some of that could be fraud, as in there was a stolen ticket, and someone stole my credit card. I realized that I didn't make that purchase and I charge it back. But some of it is this, my flight was an hour late, I'm going to charge it back. So that's another area. And then another one is cybersecurity. So cybersecurity is like the famous breach of British Airways, where some hackers got into British Airways fairly recently through a third-party app, and then their data was compromised, and then that data could be sold for on the dark web, etc. So, and British Airways paid a hefty fine for that in the European Union. So I guess that's then we have loyalty fraud as well, which is some of the account takeover stuff. And there's sophisticated fraud where people use bots in automated attacks, and they're coming sophisticated and heavy. And then there's what we call low and slow, which is it could be even a fraudster calling the call center and tricking the call center agent to take over an account one by one. That would be a low and slow attack. So you've got the gamut from using sophisticated tools and low and slow. And then to throw into the mix, we even have state actors. So some of the breaches into airlines could even be from a nation state. An example could be that let's say there's a defense conference in Las Vegas, and China and Israel and North Korea and nation states may want to know who's attending that conference. So they may actually try to breach airlines and hotels, et cetera, to find who's there and what they're up to. So airlines even need to defend themselves against nation states. And then I would suspect that countries like North Korea, Russia, China, they may then sell some of that information for profit on top of that. So it may serve two purposes, right? The main purpose is for espionage, but they're also reselling information that they get for a profit.
I see. Now, Chris, you and I have been in the industry for decades now, so we know that airlines are generally not profitable. So what are some ways that airlines fraud prevention could be improved in order to help them not lose the slim margins they're making to lose that to fraud?
Yes. So I hopefully it's going to get better, but what is it? The average profit margin of an airline over the last 40 years is 2%. Maybe is that if they are profitable, 1-2%.
Yeah.
If they even are profitable, and over the lifetime of the industry, I don't believe the industry has lost money. And now with COVID, I don't even know where profit margins stand. It's probably all over the map. But fraud should be well over 1% of most airlines. So if you have a good core fraud prevention tool in place, you're going to get it well below 0.5%. But that's your loss to fraud. And you have to have some losses, because if you stop all fraud, the only way to stop all fraud is to stop selling, and then you have no sales, right? So
yeah,
you have to get it. There's a balance, right? So you're going to get it well below 0.5% of your turnover, but then you have the cost of the staff, the cost of the cost of systems, etc. Then this doesn't even count like cybersecurity, loss of future business if a customer turns away from you, etc. So I would figure fraud's well over 1%, right? So and if there's a breach and a big fine, then you're looking at 2, 3, 4%, and that could be your, more than your margin that year. So fraud is definitely, it's definitely there and key to profitability. And I think the challenge always in airlines, and you probably see this as a profitability expert, a lot of the senior executives, they're very focused on operationally on the airline, like getting planes safely from point A to point B and et cetera. So credit card fraud and loyalty fraud isn't top of mind. It becomes top of mind when it's in the news. Like there's a big breach, it will be and I don't want to pick on British Airways, and I don't even have any insider information on this, but I'm sure after they had their big fine from the European Union related to a breach, I'm sure it was top of mind for the CEO there, and it probably did get some let's say internal resources, but those resources tend to be applied in public cases like that rather than day to day.
Now, Chris, if someone listening to this interview wanted to know more about the topic, or is there a way they can get in touch with you? Would you say that there's a best way to reach you?
Yes, if they Google Loyalty Security Alliance, so we are the Loyalty Security Alliance. We put on monthly webinars. We had a really nice one last month not particularly airline focused, but a bit. But it was about eliminating passwords, so which is something that airlines could do. And we had the man from Catch Me If You Can, the actual Frank that was the actual fraudster in the movie. He has now turned to the good side and consults to the FBI and large companies on how to think like a fraudster and stop fraudsters. So I interviewed him in our webinar last month. It was quite interesting.
Okay, very good. Now, do you have any closing statements or perspective to share before we end this interview?
Yes, it's all about silos in airlines, right? So you're a profitability expert, and I'm sure a lot of your audience is probably commercial. But
Yeah.
I would include a risk person in your team meetings on the commercial side. That's how you avoid these problems, right? The way to mitigate risk is to have good communication between the risk people and the risk-minded people in a business and the commercially minded people in a business. And in airlines, we're not as good as retail, right? So I see in retail, it's just natural that risk and commercial work better together. But in airlines, we built up these silos over the years, and they're hard to break down. But break down those silos and bring risk people into your commercial discussions, and you'll mitigate your fraud.
Okay, very good. Chris, thank you very much for your time today. And I hope you'll be available some other time to come back and talk.
Yep. Thank you for having me, and it was a great pleasure to be here.